Thursday, November 15th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So what's happening with the Bank of England? Have they got any gold? Uh, yeah, where's the gold? Why are they making it so hard for like Venezuela and for countries like Australia to audit their gold? I want to talk about that today. Where's the gold? Some of you might remember the advert on U.S. television about where's the beef. I've made a video about this, the Australian situation. That was on October 24th this year. It was entitled, "Is Australia's Gold Safe?" with the Bank of England, and I'll go on about it a little later with the latest video made about this subject on an Australian YouTube channel called Walk the World, and it's an interview of John Adams, the economist, who is trying to find out what's going on at the Bank of England. And I'll talk a little bit about the Venezuelan case as well, and what really happens with what I think really is happening with the gold at the Bank of England. And I'll also touch upon this book here entitled The Rothschilds, The Financial Rulers of Nations. This is written over 100 years ago in the 19th century by John Reeves. I highly recommend this. Am I a Rothschild file? No, of course not. But you need to know a bit about the people who are high up there, who don't have your interest at heart. And there's a section in here where the author admits actually that the story might not be true, but it shows you the kind of thing that could have happened then with the Bank of England and as far as the Rothschilds are concerned. And I find it really interesting, especially with what's happening now with the Bank of England. Excuse me. So before I go further into that, I'm going to look at what the markets are doing. It's 8:24 a.m. London time. Yesterday was a very interesting day. I think, the Dow finished down 206 points, or down 0.8%. S&P, same kind of performance, down 0.75%, down 20 points. NASDAQ finished down 0.9% at 65 points. And the markets were down even more intraday. A lot of speculation right now about Brexit, about Prime Minister May. She had a very long meeting, their cabinet meeting, trying to get her cabinet to approve her Brexit deal. It took 4 or 5 hours or something, and I see today that the pound rebounded a little bit after that, but still not out of the woods, I would say. The headline on Bloomberg this morning is "May on the brink as Tories plot to kill her Brexit deal." And one of her ministers resigned as well, the Northern Ireland minister. So that needs to, apart from Italy, a Brexit with no deal, which is a hard Brexit, could impact the markets worldwide, not just in the UK. Yesterday we saw that when things weren't looking great, and the danger as well is that you could have a no confidence vote or a confidence vote on the government. The government could fall in the UK. You could have general elections. There's more uncertainty. So let's go see what we're doing. Gold has rallied well late yesterday. I think partly related to this Brexit, maybe not. Who knows? But right now we're at 1214.50, up about $4. Range has been 1208 to 1215.20. So gold up 1/3%. Spot silver 1423, up 10 cents or 0.75%. Silver very undervalued, especially against gold and everything else for that matter. Stock market after let's see, 900-point losses in 3 days. The Dow, we lost 600 on Monday, 100 on Tuesday, 200 yesterday. We're up 102 at the moment, but it could change. It could be a lot higher or a lot lower. Very volatile right now. We're up 0.4%. S&P is up 0.38% at 2712. And the NASDAQ 100 future up 50 or almost 0.75% at 6820. Yeah, the technicals not looking great. Right now, we're approaching like, how can I say, death crosses in the S&P and the NASDAQ. We've already seen the 50-day moving average move below the 100 in the NASDAQ and the S&P. And now the 50 is approaching the 200. It's not there yet. That would be a bad technical signal. Currencies. The pound is down 6 pips, 129.85. But it could, who knows? Prime Minister May is going to speak to Parliament later on today. We'll see what the reaction is, what happens in the afternoon. We could very well be below 128 or above 130.50 this afternoon. Longer term, of course, I still think the pound is going south against tangible goods, probably against the dollar as well. Euro up 1/3%, 113.45. Dollar down 0.15% against the yen at 113.45. Same price as the euro against the dollar, which is strange. The dollar is down 1/4% against the Chinese currency at 692.65. Crude oil, it's 56.40. The WTI pretty much unchanged. Brent is up 0.5% at 66.50. Bond market yesterday, we saw the 10-year-old drop 2 basis points to 312. And right now, we're still at that level. Italy has come off a little bit. The 10-year-old there, BTP, is at 347, down 2 at the moment. If you think the Moneco64 channel adds value to you and you'd like to contribute or help the channel, check the links below in the description. So, where's the gold? Well, a few years ago, this was 2012. I remember it quite well. The Queen and her husband toured the Bank of England vaults, and they had these photos shown, of her there, all the gold bars, and you kind of wonder at the time. I think it was right after the financial crisis. I'm not sure if that was the time when Germany and other countries were asking for their gold back. It was weird to have pictures of her like that in front of the gold. Was it a signal to say, don't worry, the gold is there, the Queen vouches for it? But the thing is, most of that gold anyway is not the UK's gold. Or the Treasury, Her Majesty's Treasury gold. The Treasury only has about 300 tons, and the Bank of England holds over, I think, around 5,000 tons. So a lot of that gold is held for other sovereign countries. And even though it looks like the gold is there, I personally, my theory is that with the LBMA, with the bullion banks, through the London, bullion market, through the ETF in the US, through COMEX, because you got to understand the London banks, bullion banks, LBMA, the US banks in London, they all work with the COMEX, with the LBMA. It's all connected. I think a lot of that gold is legally not there. It's physically there, but it's been leased out many times over. That's why a lot of the foreign banks come to London. In London, there's no limit to hypothecating. You can rehypothecate, which means lend the same thing over as many times as you want. In the US, there's a limit, and that's why there are more US banks in London than there are in New York, which is weird. But it allows him to do that. And we know the City of London, excuse me, is not technically in the UK. It's a foreign supranational entity. So a lot of these deals are done physically in London, but they're based, offshore anywhere. They could do all these shenanigans anywhere. So, as I said, recently I made the video about the RBA and John Adams, and I recommend you listen to my video. It's not that long. It's 22 minutes. And John Adams in Australia, he demanded through a Freedom of Information action information about the gold held at the Bank of England, that is Australia's. 99% of Australia's gold, or 80 tons, is at the Bank of England. And he found out that there was only one audit in 2013, and that audit itself was only of a few bars, and it had to be done. They had to tell the Bank of England a month in advance when they're going to come to do the audit. And the Bank of England set all the rules for the audit, which is weird because it should be independent, and you should be able to go there unannounced and say, I want to see my gold. And they didn't do that. So what's happened now? Well, John Adams, he's after he got the response from the initial inquiry with the RBA, he also asked several questions about what was going to happen to the gold if there's going to be another audit soon. And that gold has been there over 20 years. It's only been audited once, and only a few bars were audited. So like John Adams said, it's like you buying a house 20 years ago, and the builder showing you a couple of bricks of the house and saying, oh, you can't see the house, but look, there's a few bricks. But now he's saying that the RBA has refused to answer any of his questions, and the title of their video, which I'll put up as well in the cards in the description, is the RBA says shut up and go away. So why all the secrecy? Why is the Bank of England so difficult when the countries ask for audits? And they also talk about Venezuela, the fact that the Bank of England is defaulting on its obligation. And I use the word default because that's what it is, because it's Venezuela's gold, and they're not delivering it. It's like if you have money in the bank and you go to get the money and they don't let you have your money, it's because they don't have it. They might use the excuse of money laundering and stuff, but countries, governments don't launder money. That gold is there. It's not laundered money. It's the wealth, the treasure that Venezuela has been able to save over decades. So the excuse of money laundering is just a lame excuse. What is happening? Why is the Bank of England, if they've got so many gold bars, as I showed you there when the Queen toured it, why are they so, how can I say, unwilling to allow their clients to audit the gold or take the gold out in the case of Venezuela? Well, I think it's because with the rehypothecation, times we don't know how much, the bullion banks in London, the central banks, the BIS, they're manipulating the price of gold lower. So if the sheeple and these pesky countries keep asking for audits, the gold's not going to be there because a lot of times they've leased it out. Sometimes they've had to deliver, and the gold is not there. Australia might have 80 tons and think that they're only leasing about 11 tons, but the Bank of England might be using Australia's gold to lease out 800 tons, 10 times. So that's the situation. And the problem with the audit is that they have to show the bars. And that's why the Bank of England told the RBA years ago, you have to tell us in advance. Why? Well, because they probably go to the refiners in Switzerland or elsewhere and say, oh, we need these bars. You know, we need these bars and these numbers, please, because, you know, the Chinese have it now and they've turned it into 1 kilo bars. They probably won't say that, but that's the reason. So, yeah, it looks like they have a lot of gold there. And they probably do physically. The problem is that, in my opinion, they've leased out that gold many times over, and that's why they don't want to. They want to discourage all the countries, and I don't know exactly what countries have gold with the Bank of England, and I would encourage them to not hold it there, you know, because gold supposedly is a, you know, the gold standard is a barbarous relic. Gold isn't money anymore, right? It's not used in the system. So why do we need to keep it at the Bank of England? You know, we should keep, you know, countries should keep it with themselves. Like John Adams said, his 4-year-old daughter even said, Australia's treasures should be in Australia. So other countries' treasures should not be with the old lady of Threadneedle Street. So what about the Rothschild, The Financial Rules of Nations, by John Reeves? And this book, of course, was very interesting. It was written in 1887. There's a section here, and I'll read about it. It's quite interesting, and it's to do with Nathan Rothschild and the Bank of England, page 182. And I'll read. It says, this story is so characteristic of the man that its authenticity seems undeniable, but the same cannot be said of the following anecdote, which is evidently due to the fertile brain of some imaginary writer. The very minuteness of detail and the dramatic completeness of the narrative are enough to make one suspicious of its genuineness. It might not be true, but the fact that, you know, this story is out there, someone made this story up, shows that what could have happened back then, right? So it goes on to say, the elements of improbability are too prominent and manifest to fail to strike the reader. The story runs that the bank mortally offended Nathan Meyer, Rothschild, by refusing to discount a bill drawn upon him for a large amount by his brother Anselm of Frankfurt. The bank had haughtily replied that, and I quote, they discounted only their own bills and not those of private persons. But they had to deal with one stronger even than the bank. And this is what Nathan Rothschild said. Private persons, exclaimed Rothschild, when the fact was that reported to him. And I quote again, Rothschild, private persons, I will make these gentlemen feel what sort of private persons we are. And it goes on to say, 3 weeks afterwards, Nathan Meyer, excuse me, Nathan Meyer, who had employed the interval in collecting all the banknotes he could procure in England and on the continent, presented himself at the bank as soon as it was opened. He drew upon his pocketbook a £5 note, and the clerk naturally counted out 5 sovereigns, at the same time looking with great astonishment at Rothschild. So 5 sovereigns, we know what those are, 5 gold coins for a £5 note. It seems strange that he should trouble himself for such a trifle. He, however, examined the coins carefully one by one and put them in a little canvas bag. Then, drawing out another note, a third, a fourth, a tenth, a hundredth, he kept demanding change for his notes, never placing the money in his bag without first scrupulously examining the pieces. In some cases, he would try them in the balance, so he'd weigh it. As he observed, the law gave him the right to do. The first pocketbook being emptied and the first bag filled, he passed them to his clerk and received a second supply of notes, thus continuing to drain the bank of its gold till the doors were closed. He had spent 7 hours in changing 21,000 pounds. But as he had 9 of his employees engaged in the same manner, it resulted that the bank had lost 210,000 pounds from its gold reserves. So that's an interesting anecdote. I don't know if it's true, but it's something that he could have done back then. And nowadays, it looks like Venezuela can't do it. We certainly can't go there anymore as an individual with a £5 note and get 5 sovereigns. You know, even though there's a promise to pay on demand the bearer the sum of £5, that promise is completely empty. Bank of England notes are fraudulent, and it's not a promissory note because they don't pay you with anything anymore. They just give you a new note. So hopefully that will explain to you why I think the Bank of England is being so difficult about giving countries their gold back, about auditing them. I think it's all to do with keeping the price of gold subdued. And they can't have people demanding their gold back, demanding audits, because they're probably doing some shady deals. They're lending a lot, many times over the gold that they seem to have there in the vaults. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share it far and wide, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, click on the red button, and you can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.